This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Our guest is Christian Parenti. He has a new book out. It's called Tropic of Chaos, Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence. We have a chapter on our website at democracynow.org. And in this part two of our conversation, Christian, you wrote a very interesting piece in The Nation magazine right after Fukushima happened. Nuclear hubris. Could Japan's disaster happen here? I mean, we're talking about 3 of the 4 nuclear reactors in Japan experiencing full meltdowns. What does this mean for nuclear power?
It could happen here, definitely. I mean, we have plants of the exact same design, such as Vermont Yankee. The plants aren't required to have backup systems for their spent fuel pools, and now we see these flooding. These 2 plants getting flooded in the Midwest, which is, you know, the exact same scenario, practically not a tsunami, but a flood for how this thing could go down. And I think it's important to really problematize atomic power, because some in the green movement look to it as a solution. They think that this will be the magic bullet. But even, you know, putting aside the dangers, even in the terms that some people argue for it, there's no way that this economy can create enough power from atomic energy in a cost-efficient manner in the time necessary. And the more that money goes towards atomic power, the less goes towards the transition to clean technology. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission says that the new 4th-generation nuke plants that everyone lauds aren't going to come online for another, I think it's 12 years. Not a single nuke plant in this country has been built on budget or on time. So that's highly unrealistic. And what's really going on beneath this discussion about the future is the present fleet of plants that were designed to last for 40 years have almost all been getting uprates and relicenses. An uprate is when they get to run at 120% of their intended design capacity, and they're extending their licenses for 60 years. And the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is essentially rubber stamping this again and again and again, and it's begging for some sort of calamity. And the firms that own these frequently, through deregulation, the stranded costs of the plants have been paid off by the public, by the government. So these plants are now just cash cows. They're like money presses. And so, of course, these companies like Entergy want to run them as far as they can into the future, because it's almost all profit, because they didn't really have to pay for the debts they incurred.
And, of course, the Associated Press report in recent weeks, the series about the major problems that many of these plants, as you're saying, that were whose power was increased, and the problems with corrosion of pipes and safety problems that have been largely ignored, with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission just sort of redefining what is a safe level, very much like what was happening in Japan after Fukushima in terms of exposure. Yet the Obama administration, not just some green advocates, but the Obama administration continues to see nuclear power as part of the solution for energy independence and moving away from fossil fuels.
Yeah. We now know that most of these plants seem to be leaking tritium. None of them have workable evacuation plans, and so they have been allowed to go forward, get relicensed without these evacuation plans. You know, a lot of these plants were built in the countryside. They're now surrounded by suburbs. It'd be impossible to evacuate them. And Obama, as we all know, is...
I mean, Indian Point is 50 miles from New York City.
Yeah, and Oyster Creek in southern New Jersey, surrounded, 30 miles from Philadelphia, surrounded by suburbs. You can barely drive through on a good day. Yeah, and Obama, from the beginning, we saw he was in the pocket of the nuke industry, very close to Exelon, which is a major operator of plants, and David Axelrod worked for Exelon. I think
Rowe, the head of Exelon, is on the committee that President Obama has established to look at nuclear as part of the solution.
And I mean, another thing that may or may not be intentional, but is a kind of political function of this whole discourse, is that the more we talk about the feasibility of atomic power, because it's not going to get built. These things are so expensive that Wall Street is not getting behind them. The more we talk about them, the less we're talking about closing coal plants and moving to clean technology. So the fossil fuel industry benefits from this red herring of the future of nukes.
What about this latest news? Greenpeace revealing one of the world's most prominent scientific figures to be skeptical about climate change has admitted to being paid more than $1 million in the past decade by major U.S. oil and coal companies. Yeah. His name is Willie Soon. He works as an astrophysicist at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics since 2001. He's received money from ExxonMobil, American Petroleum Institute, Koch Industries, along with Southern, one of the world's largest coal-burning utility companies.
Right. And he claims that that had zero effect on his research. You know, the late Robert Fitch, who was a writer and academic in the New York area, said that vulgar Marxism explains about 90% of what goes on in reality. I mean, and that is just a case of, like, you know, vulgar Marxism. The industry pays this guy, and he says exactly what they want. I mean, the story is its own critique. It's appalling.
You grew up in the shadow of Vermont Yankee?
I did, and that's part of why I'm concerned about this, is because growing up this was a real issue, and I would protest it at the gates of Vermont Yankee. And I'm aware of how old and rickety it is. And I know Peter Shumlin, who's the governor of Vermont, who is fighting to close that plant, which would be one of the reason the Vermont legislature has the power to shut it is because of the protests when I was growing up, a small child. That was the compromise. It's the only plant in the country where the state has a say over the relicensing. And the company Entergy is having secret meetings with the NRC to get around this. They're organizing in Vermont towns, spending lots of money to spread lies about the economic costs of cutting this.
Well, they've sued to say that the state legislature of Vermont should not be able to have a say over what Entergy does, this private corporation.
Yeah. Which is a violation of the original agreement.
And you also have now Governor Cuomo here in New York talking about that moving more aggressively on the issue of whether the permits for the Indian Point plant will be renewed when they come up in the next few years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what happens with the crisis at Los Alamos and these plants that are inundated with water right now. And as you know, you were mentioning off air or maybe on air that there's no reporters there from the local papers. So we have yet to see how this crisis will play out, and hopefully it will galvanize people like Shumlin and other governors who are having questions about this, and maybe even JASCO at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission will realize that this is too great a risk to take.
We want to thank you very much for being with us. Christian Parenti, Tropic of Chaos is his new book, Climate Change and the New Geography of Violence. You can go to our website to read a chapter of Tropic of Chaos, democracynow.org. Thanks so much.